Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I am Patti Callahan Henry.
I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
And this is Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, librarians, and readers like you.
Now, if you're not with us already, we hope you'll join our Facebook group, which is nearly, I can't even believe I'm saying this, 290,000 members strong. That's 290K strong. We'd also like to invite you to follow us on Instagram and YouTube and to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, which is full of awesome bonus content. You can find out more about our community and all we have to offer at friendsandfiction.com.
But on this episode, even with all we have to offer, we are so excited to welcome Susan Wiggs to discuss her new novel, Wayward Girls, which was just released on July 15th. We'll be talking about the true life inspiration. There's Mary Kay with the cover, her career, and of course, what she is up to now. So let me give you some background on Susan. Susan's novels have appeared in the #1 spot on the New York Times bestseller list, and her books have captured readers' hearts around the globe with translations into more than 20 languages in 30 countries.
Susan's life is all about family, friends, and fiction, kind of like us.
Like us.
She lives at the water's edge in Puget Sound, and in good weather, she commutes to her writers group in a 21-foot motorboat. I mean, what a dream. She's been featured in the national media, including NPR, PRI, and USA Today. She's given programs for the U.S. embassies in Buenos Aires and Montevideo, and is a popular speaker locally, nationally, internationally, and on the high seas. And if you haven't, check out her social media because lots of times she posts pictures of her adorable grandgirl, right? Which is something Patti and I have in common too.
Yeah, and we like to post about them. Yours just had a birthday.
Yeah.
Oh, she's so grown up. It just kills me. Okay. From the start, Susan's writings have illuminated the everyday dramas of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. Her books celebrate the power of love, the timeless bonds of family, and the nuance of, being human.
Susan is a former teacher, a Harvard graduate, an avid hiker, an amateur photographer, a good skier, but a terrible golfer. But her favorite form of exercise is curling up with a good book. Something else we have in common.
I was going to say, if that could burn calories, I'd be in it. So her new novel, Wayward Girls, was just released, as I mentioned, on July 15th with a starred review from Library Journal. And they said this powerful and unforgettable novel is a poignant and enlightening look into a sad chapter of recent history. So instead of talking about her, we are going to talk to her. Sean, could you please bring Susan on?
Hi there. Hello.
We are so happy to have you.
Oh, it's thrilling to be here. I'm such a fan of everything that you've built. This is an amazing community that you made, and I feel like I've actually made friends, and I'm such a loner. So thank you for having me.
Goodness. We are delighted to have you on the Friends and Fiction Show. So before we dig into Wayward, I want to talk to you about writing. Because I want to talk about how you started in this career. I always find it fascinating how someone like you decides, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Did you just fall into it? Did you decide? For me and for Mary Kay, it was a very deliberate choice at a hinge moment in our life. For you, you were a teacher and your first novel came out in 1987. So take it from there.
You know what? I have to go even further back than that because I think my story starts basically when I was old enough to think. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I didn't know that I ever wasn't a storyteller. And I have proof of it because my mom had like 3 little stair-step kids and I was in the middle and she was very busy. And I would, as soon as I could talk, or even before, I would scribble on paper and I would tell my mom, write this down. And God love her, she would, she would try to get some stories out. And the reason I still have a couple of examples of this is that she was so busy that instead of writing to her parents who lived in Florida, she would just stuff my stories in an envelope and mail them to them. Here's what Susan's up to. And so I truly was, I guess, a born storyteller. I didn't know there was any other way to think or act or live. And of course, all through childhood, I wrote, I illustrated, I thought in stories. And so I had that teacher that I hope every kid gets to have. And this is one reason I probably later became a teacher, because I didn't have a patron of the arts. And that is in grade 3. I don't know, do they even do this anymore? That's when you transition from manuscript printing, the up and down, to cursive writing. And for me, that was like a magic moment. I was very fascinated by the whole process. I was amazed by how my handwriting looked. I just was obsessed. And so my 3rd grade teacher, her name was Mrs. Green, and I thought she was 100 years old, and she was probably like 38.
And probably 25.
Yeah, exactly. And I was also, like a lot of writers, I was an early reader, and I was reading ahead of the rest of the class. And I told her I wanted to be a book writer. And she said, well, if you're going to be a book writer, you should be writing books. And she gave me a big chief tablet and a big pencil and a pen and stapler, everything. And she said, well, go write a book. And so, being a commercial writer, I wrote many books. And every time I would finish one, she would call the class around and get up on her stool. Boys and girls, Susan has written a book. And she would read it to them. And it was so awesome. She made me feel like a pro at age 8. And so it was never a conscious decision. The only decision is, how am I going to support myself while I'm an emerging writer? I wasn't even an aspiring writer. I didn't aspire to write. I was writing. But I had to emerge from, unpublished to published. And so I thought, foolishly, as it turns out, I'll be a teacher. That way I'll finish work by 3 p.m. Right. I'll get, summers off and have all the time in the world to write my books. And I did manage to squeeze in both the writing and the teaching. And, but what a relief to finally transition. And I was always the sole income for my family. So I had to raise my daughter just on teaching and then on writing. And so it was very challenging. But I was also 20 something years old and had endless energy. And so that was, I built my career out of desperation and poverty at first, but the writing always took hold, it always took, and I did writing jobs that I didn't like. I wrote things that I thought, but I bet this has happened to you. You don't think you're so into a topic. You're like, yeah, I guess I could write about that. You have an agent. Patti and I have the same agent who throws out ideas.
Hi, Meg.
Yeah, she'll be like, dogs at Christmas, something. And the next thing I know, I'm writing 12 dogs at Christmas or whatever. So, but you grow into liking your idea by writing your idea. And so that was kind of the path that my career took. And that's how I've done business ever since. So it's definitely been a journey. It's been a pleasure filled with frustrations and bumps along the way and, moments of joy. Like right now is my favorite time of a book. When the book is out in the world, it's not my book anymore. It belongs
for readers.
Yeah. Thank you. It's, I think people underestimate how creative the act of reading is, but, and I'm sure this because you hear back from your readers, everybody reads a different book. You
Yeah.
know, they all see it from their perspective, and it's fascinating to me, and I love it. And I'm not responsible for it anymore. I did my thing.
Yeah, you did your job. Time for them to do theirs.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk nitty gritty. Let's talk Wayward Girls. You've got 16 girls who are locked away in a secretive institution, a reform school, really, run by Catholic nuns. And their story becomes one of survival and redemption. The story follows Marin, the free-spirited daughter of Irish immigrants, and then 5 more truly fascinating women navigating the horrors of this place. Is that what this book is about to you, Susan? Or what is Wayward Girls really about?
You know, I think it's one of the few books that I've written that spans decades, but the bulk of the story, it begins in 1968, and the girls are about 15, to 17 years old, and so it's really a coming of age journey. And as you mentioned, a survival story. These girls find themselves, locked away in a reform school run by nuns, which sounds like, a really spooky movie, but it actually happened. And so for me, it was, I was very focused on the way that we treated women through the ages, right up until the present day, and the way that we can protect ourselves and grow from trauma into back into balance by seeking justice and finding our voice. And so, but I never think of those things when I'm writing a book. I usually think, how soon is cocktail hour?
Yeah.
No, I usually think about where the character is taking me, and what the next logical step is for her, and what she's feeling in her heart. That's usually what leads me through the story, through the first draft, at least.
Yeah, I don't think we can know what things are really about before we write them. I know Mary Kay doesn't. Neither one of us. Sometimes we don't know what it's really about till a reader tells us.
You're right to find out what you're thinking about.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I know that this is inspired by and based on a true story. Can you tell us how you first found out about this home? I think it was in 2021 that you found out about it.
Yes. And this is one of the few books where I really do know where that kernel of an idea came. Sometimes we don't know, we're just bombarded and then we're off to the races. But this one was very specific. And it was, I don't know if it would be called a recovered memory, but it was a memory that I had when my older brother and I went to this small town in upstate New York, in Western New York, near Buffalo. And it was a nostalgia trip for us because we moved away when we were little. I was 10 years old and he was 12, and we moved overseas. And so we went back to this little town to walk around and see it through our adult eyes. And we went to our church. And there's something about, especially an old stone church, that has a lot of triggers for me, the echoes and the smells and the way the air feels on your skin. And we went into St. Mary's Church in Olean, New York, big Gothic thing. And I was flooded by a memory. And I turned to my brother and I said, "You were an altar boy." And he said, "Yeah, I got to be an altar boy for about 5 minutes. And then we moved." And I said, and did you catch on fire? What happened? And it turned out he was the guy who swings the incense thurible, holes in it. And so, and he swung it too hard. I don't know what happened. I barely remember, but I remember that his sleeve caught on fire, or his robe, whatever he was wearing. And that was all I remembered. And I never thought of it until that moment. So it was somewhere, deep in my psyche that my brother caught on fire in the church. And that seemed kind of, in a little oblique way, it made it into the book. But first, it obviously sparked a conversation, and we started talking about the impact of the church. It was a really, really powerful presence in these small towns in New York and probably all over the place in the 60s. And then he remembered that we had a babysitter who went away. And that only meant one thing, back then. It meant that somebody had an unplanned pregnancy, and she may or may not, maybe her mom had a unexpected little sister, or, something like that. But it was all very mysterious, and I was kind of too young to remember. But like every writer does, I did the deep dive. And Patti, I bet you do this a lot. You go down a rabbit hole. You go to the library, you talk to somebody, inevitably we go to the internet and start poking around at something. And I was poking around, and I was a little bit aware of the Magdalen laundries in Ireland, which got a lot of press because they were so awful. And there were movies. There was the Magdalene sisters and Philomena, and the lately Small Things Like These that dealt with the topic of the Magdalen laundries in Ireland. And they were, workhouses for women who were either unplanned pregnancies or misfits or indigent or something. And I had no idea there were at least 38 that I found in the US. And
Wow.
and the very worst one, the building still exists. And so this is another case for making friends of writers. One of my very dear writer friends is Jerry Croteau, and she's from Buffalo. And I was on the West Coast, and it was really hard to schedule a trip because I was caregiving for my mom at the time. And so I asked her to go find this address, 485 Best Street. And she said, "Oh boy, are there ghosts?" And if people are curious, there at the top of my Instagram feed, I think has a little video that shows this building where it all took place in the 60s. And so, I just did my due diligence. I contacted the Buffalo Historical Society, and I somehow wended my way to looking at court documents because, of course, there are currently lawsuits that are active right now for compensation or whatever. And I just did my homework as a writer, and there were so many fascinating and heartbreaking stories. And so I really wanted my girls, my fictional girls, to kind of be a microcosm of that. Each one sort of represented a typical case that might have found themselves in this institution. So, but they were girls, they were like our daughters and our granddaughters. They
were just everyday girls. Yeah.
Yes. And that was part of the joy of writing about them, was writing about how sturdy a person's spirit is and how you get strength from your friendships.
What surprised you the most in your research, Susan?
Couple of things. I wasn't aware that in most Catholic schools, the girls weren't allowed to listen to male voices singing unless it was liturgical music, right?
Gosh.
Yeah. Oh, another thing. Yeah, I know. No Beatles, no Elvis, whatever. And then another thing that surprised me was that, and I used this in the book and it worked out really nicely. In 1969, Niagara Falls stopped. It dried up. And of course, the nuns deemed it a miracle. But when I looked into it further, there was an explanation. So that was a surprise, and a couple things like that. Just little tidbits, and that's why it's so rewarding to do a really deep dive into research, because you're writing a story, but the story is revealing itself to you, and that happened numerous times. Another thing that sort of made it into the book was there was a race riot in 1967 in Buffalo that was so intense that they brought the baseball star Jackie Robinson in to help quell it. And that kind of brought back, I was little at the time, but I do remember my mother writing postcards and going to meetings and marching and everything. And so there were some surprises that kind of surprised me out of the past, I guess.
It's nice when those rise up, though.
Yep.
Makes it come alive. Yep.
So, as soon as I read this scene, a bookmobile plays a pivotal role in Wayward Girls. And I'm like, oh, I'm so mad I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
The bookmobile in my hometown in St. Pete, Florida, that was a lifesaver for my family because the main branch in St. Pete was miles from our house. My mother's only cart was a golf cart. My father was at the time working as a golf cart salesman, so he had a car and she had a golf cart, and she would load all 5 of us kids on it to go to the bookmobile at the A&P shopping center. And so I'm imagining you selecting books for the young women imprisoned at Good Shepherd to read. Of course, I was reading anything that had the library system at the time was, if it had a skull on the spine, it was a mystery, and I wanted to read it. Or
Oh my gosh, I never heard you say that before.
Yeah, or a magnifying glass. Nancy Drew books always had a magnifying glass.
Magnifying glass, I do.
I remember that.
Yeah. So, or I was reading, Laura Ingalls Wilder, and I was reading, Louisa May Alcott, all the books that had a girl who was a writer. What would you want those girls at the Good Shepherd to read in 1968 off that bookmobile?
That's a really good question. And the bookmobile, the fact that it did visit the Good Shepherd is a real thing. I found out through my research there was a once a month thing. But as I thought about it, I realized the nuns were so controlling and evil. They probably would have, tried to vet the books,
Right.
and not let anything that they considered unacceptable to come through. But in the 60s, I would have wanted my girls, I would have wanted them to read The Diary of Anne Frank. I would have wanted them to read, I don't know if it was probably not published at the time. Was it called Go Ask Alice? That fake memoir by Anonymous. God, that was the one thing that kept me off drugs all my life, was when I read about how she had to go in a dumpster to get like menstrual supplies or something. It was horrible. And there was another one. It was a series of books that I think they started in the 60s, but it featured an openly gay woman. Her name was Bebo Morris or something like that. And it was a series, and I had never heard of it, but it kind of changed the life of at least one of my characters. And I really, I would love to share that. Anything that was like coming of age. Remember 15 by Beverly Cleary?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Things that speak to who you are, not liturgical works or the canon of the saints, all those kind of things. But books really shaped me as a person and a reader. One of the things, my mother was kind of an activist, and she volunteered at the library. She was also a teacher, but she was a reader of things that come in, because, and I don't know what you call it. She would talk to the acquisitions people and say, I read that. She would report on what she read, and she wouldn't usually editorialize about it, but, acquisitions was really important because they have to budget for certain books. And so she would bring home stacks of books to read. And so I was raised by this reading mother, and she would have us read. If it was a children's book, she would have us read the books and give her a little report about it. And so they were so important to me. They were like, my friends, and my mentors were books. And so sadly, I think in institutions like this, there was not a lot of good material to read, but they found a way to do it. And yes, the bookmobile is one of my favorite scenes in the book. So thanks for mentioning that.
So the book is set in 1968. Yeah. I don't think we mentioned that. And as also a writer who writes about time that has passed and cannot go visit at this moment, how did you go about bringing that time period to become so alive on the page for us? What did you dig into your own life? Did you do primary research? What did you do to kind of lift that time period onto the pages?
I did, of course, a ton of reading, but also I listened to music. The internet makes it so easy to say, what were the top songs of 1968? Yeah. What were the top movies? And that's why when Marin, the main character, sneaks off on a date with a boy she has a crush on, they go see The Graduate, which she has somehow convinced her mother was about education or getting an education. And so it was really that was quite a pleasure. I got to listen to music that I'd either never heard or hadn't heard in decades. So I did that, and bringing it to life also. I don't know how I went down this rabbit hole, but there's like a whole online community of people who find old simplicity and McCall's sewing patterns.
Yeah.
And the one, the cover art on that was always just so intriguing to me. My grandmother was she sewed a lot and had the patterns and everything. And so, the headscarf or the fringed vest or the bell bottoms, things like that. It was super fun. That was one of the.
Hey, I lived that. Okay.
I want pictures. If you find a picture of yourself in go-go boots, I will send you chocolate.
You know what I remember? My mother, we didn't have a lot of money. And so, but go-go boots and the corsage dress were the big thing, probably in 68. And so my mom found go-go boots, like white vinyl go-go boots.
Those were the ones, yes.
Yeah, for my two sisters and I, but they had no zipper because they were like $3 go-go boots. So, we're in there like, trying to pull our go-go boots up over our black fishnet pantyhose.
Oh my gosh.
Now people need to some people don't know what the term go-go boots are. They're the tall, knee-high, chunky-heeled vinyl boots, usually white. That was go-go boots. They were awesome. They look great with a mini skirt.
I want to bring them back. Let's bring them back.
Next book tour, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about something that was taboo. I find motherhood was such a taboo topic when I was growing up, a nice Catholic girl in the 60s and 70s. And it wasn't just, the Magdalene laundries. There was a Florence Crittenden home in St. Pete. And I was asking my husband, he was my high school sweetheart. I said, was that on 9th Street? Was that your memory? And he said, yeah, I think it actually was. And I can remember it looked so foreboding. And we would ask my mother what that place was. And I think at some time she said, well, that's where girls go who got pregnant or whatever, or got in trouble. And so my sisters and I, when we passed it in the car, we would look the other way because we thought, if we looked at it, we would become unwed mothers.
Sucked in. Oh my God.
But those places looked so foreboding. It's a difficult subject. How did you find a way to bring it to such an uplifting conclusion? What was your inspiration there?
That was a difficult piece of the storyline. And I still don't think we have adequate ways to address, unplanned pregnancies even today. But back then it was even worse because there was so much secrecy about it. And I just think there's immense value in exposing these stories. Sometimes I don't know, we can all learn from the past, and yet sometimes we don't. I just wanted to shine a light on these hidden places and the very real girls who were locked away there and what happened to them. They were locked away. They weren't dangerous, but because they were too loud or they were pregnant or, something like that. And so.
Or they were inconvenient.
Yes.
Inconvenient.
They were. Oops, I had way too many daughters. I guess I'm going to put one over here. And
this daughter might tell the truth.
Yes, exactly. And the court system was very supportive of these places because it got them off the dole for them. And the nuns could pimp them out to do their laundry. And so it was a whole system, and it worked very well for, the ones who were benefiting from it, but certainly not for the girls. And so I found it really, really hard to write about, but I wanted it to be authentic. But, the whole time, and Patti, you would know this because of our mutual agent, you always want it to be uplifting, and to resonate in some positive way, even if, something awful has happened. And so I was always, and what saved me from that was just the spirit of these women and the fact that I got to write about them in 1968 and then carry their stories through to present day. And so it showed me that, it's the things that I addressed in the book, healing is possible. And I was really hopeful.
Yeah, I like that there was a sympathetic nun who, in the end, she had her own burdens, but in the end, the sympathetic nun had a part to play in their healing.
Yeah, I wanted to have a balance because the bad nun, Sister Rotrude,
Oh,
loved it when I came across that name. I'm like, oh, I know who Sister Rotrude is. And then Sister Bernadette was, was no matter what happened to her, it couldn't have been as bad as what she came from. And so
yeah.
she did have loyalty, but in the end, her conscience got the better of her, and she was kind of a key player in the resolution of that. And it was just good serendipity for me that the state of New York decided to extend. First of all, they unsealed all adoption records, which is, a key thing. And then they also extended the statute of limitations for certain crimes, that were long overdue, acknowledging that sometimes it takes decades and even longer than that to know what happened to you. There, some people who experience trauma, they don't even know what happened to them until decades later when they can kind of piece it together, hopefully in a supported mental health environment or with a lot of help and support. And so the look back laws that were enacted in New York were kind of handy for me as a writer because it gave me a positive way to conclude everything in that book.
Yeah.
And you didn't do it for one character. You have 6 girls.
Yeah.
Right? Like you follow the timelines and you show us the truth and still manage to weave all of them into an uplifting conclusion, which brings me back to the writing. You are part of a community of writers and you've been a member of a group, I think, for decades.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 things. What happens in that group that you get to write a book like this? And number 2, is it true that you commute by boat?
I do. That there are things that are closer as the crow flies or the boat goes. It would take me an hour to drive to my writers group, but I could see where we meet across the water. So the boat is handy. I first heard I was so new to writing and so young. I didn't know that that writers got together to do anything. And so, because back in the 80s, think about it, we had Writer's Digest magazine, right? And Writer's Digest book club. And those were my Bibles. And I heard about a writers group meeting, I think through the library. And I went to a talk by, and I know you know this name, Mary Higgins Clark.
Oh, wow.
Who doesn't know that name?
Mystery writer, wonderful storyteller. And one of the first things she said in her lecture was, she said, I've had the same writers group for 35 years. And I was fascinated by that. So I thought, well, I would like to be in a writers group. And it hasn't, the membership shifts and everything, but having a community of other writers around you, whether it's one other writer or 3, is such a gift, because our editors are great, our agents are great, but a writer thinks like a writer. And sometimes that's the one that you need to bounce ideas off of, and in a safe environment before you expose yourself as a fraud or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I feel really lucky that wherever I go, I've managed to hook up with other writers. My group right now has a literary author and a middle grade fiction writer, and we're just very eclectic, but writing is writing. And it doesn't seem to matter what genre you're working in. A good book is a good book. And I love that has shifted in publishing. It used to be, the pulp fiction versus the literary fiction. And I think that that's really blurred right now. It's possible to find a literary novel that's a really good page turner, or to find a page turner that has literary merit. So I feel really lucky. It's a moment in time when our books aren't pigeonholed anymore.
As much as they used to be. They still get a little.
That's true. I did see when Wayward Girls came out, it said the latest romance from Susan Wiggs.
Oh, gosh.
It was a little bit cringe because there's
not a romance.
It's not a romance.
No, there's a good guy in it, but no,
yes, there are.
There's a lot of love.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
it's all the loves that fill a woman's life over five decades. So I guess, in that respect, I'll take it.
Yeah. Okay. So now you made a playlist for this book. Tell us about the playlist.
I don't always listen to music when I write, but sometimes it really feeds my creativity, or, keeps me from overthinking things. I'm a horrible overthinker. And so sometimes having background music helps. And I usually try to source it if it's from whatever time period I'm writing about. It's often contemporary, but this one was in the 60s, which I loved because that's the music of my childhood. I loved The Who, and I loved Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, all of that. And so that was going on a lot. Sometimes it's very distracting, as you probably know.
I can't listen to words. I can have
right.
instrumental,
Yeah.
but not words.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
if some of your listeners are looking for the perfect music to write by, look for the soundtrack to Last of the Mohicans.
Oh, I'm going to try that.
I'll
Oh
try
my
it this
gosh.
afternoon. I've got
Oh
to
my
carve
gosh.
out I got to carve out some writing time this afternoon. So is the playlist for the book on your website? Where can
It
folks
is.
access that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. If they want to see the playlist, and I hope listen to some of it, they
Yeah.
should click on the reading group guide for
Okay.
Wayward Girls, because there's some questions there, and then there's a playlist.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Okay, Susan, don't you go anywhere. We have more to talk to you about. But first, we do have to give a couple reminders for our listeners and viewers who are out there.
Yeah. For all of you watching and listening, we encourage you to rush out and buy your copy of Wayward Girls. The perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. You not only be getting at a discount, but all your purchases there support our show, our guests, and indie bookstores nationwide.
And don't forget, we talked about it at the beginning in case you missed it, to visit friendsandfiction.com for details on our show schedule. Wait until you see what this season has to hold. Upcoming in-person events and links to our merch store, our Substack newsletter sign up, and the award-winning Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa. And speaking of book club, they are going to be doing a live happy hour at 7 p.m. on Facebook on Friday, August 8th, with our own Ron Block and several special guests to celebrate their 5-year anniversary. They've also got this incredible whole weekend of in-person events planned in Atlanta, August 8th through 10th at the Margaret Mitchell House and other locations around Atlanta. And I know Mary Kay is going to be there, and it is going to celebrate their 5th anniversary, and they have lots of fun guests coming.
Yeah, ton of fun coming up. Hey, speaking of our Substack, you can read all of our free weekly posts on the Substack website or app, or subscribe for free to get them directly in your inbox. And if you upgrade to our paid Substack, which we really would love it if you would, it's just $5 a month. You'll have access to deeper dives with all of our weekly show guests, like Susan, plus monthly roundtable discussions, like the one that Meg did with 10 crime fiction authors, plus monthly Q&As with additional authors, like the recent ones we ran with Ellen Meister, Adam Roberts, Christine Pride, and Joe Piazza. If you enjoy tuning in to our weekly author interviews, this is a great way you can support us for about $1 a week. I mean, you got that in the console of your car, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So check us out at friendsandfiction.substack.com.
So one more quick thing I want to tell you about is that Friends and Fiction has recently partnered with Talitha Coffee. It is a woman survivor founded company based in California. With a deep passion for combating human trafficking, Talitha's co-founder, Jenny Barber, was determined to make a difference after witnessing the devastating intergenerational impact of the issue from a young age. So every time you buy Talitha Coffee, you help change lives through hiring, training, and support for survivors of sex trafficking. So join us at Friends and Fiction along with Talitha in making a difference one cup at a time. To mail order their ethically sourced, intentionally roasted coffee, visit talitha.com/friends and fiction.
Okay, now back to Susan. Susan, I'd love to know, with a career as long-lasting as yours, and you've been doing this even longer than me. My first book didn't come out until 92. What's inspiring you now?
Wow, what a good question. What's inspiring me now is probably my readers. For some
Love
reason,
that.
I feel really, really close to them, more so than I did in the past. I don't know. Are my stories getting more personal, or, am I just getting old and sentimental? I'm not sure. But I love it when I hear from a reader, some comment that she makes about her life or something like that. And sure enough, I had a discussion with it was a reader and a friend, about our sisters. I think you guys are sisters, right? You have sisters.
Yes.
And suddenly I'm like, this, I'm starting to feel that little twist that you feel when it's a little twist of inspiration. So there's that. And, this beautiful part of the world that we live in is very inspirational. And so I don't know, just opening myself to the universe of ideas is probably my current passion.
I'm
Oh,
sure you're going to hear a lot from folks, women who've been reading Wayward Girls. Every woman of a certain age had a classmate that suddenly went
disappeared.
away.
Everybody knows
Or
somebody. They know somebody who knew somebody.
Mhm.
It's really pervasive.
And not just because there was an unexpected pregnancy, but because they were a wayward girl.
Yes.
They,
We're all wayward girls.
yeah, I hope
There's
so.
that part of ourselves. And I was so touched by your story of the Khalifa coffee, because human trafficking was a thing. They didn't call it that, but if it was an unauthorized adoption that was set up privately, probably without consent of the birth mother, that's a form of that. And so I really appreciate that this company is supporting that.
Yep.
Yeah.
We love partnering with them.
Yeah.
All right, Susan, tell everyone where they can find you, either on the road, online, on socials. Where can we find Susan Wiggs?
Probably not on the road, because you got to take a ferry to get here, but online, I think I'm most active on Instagram because it's
Okay.
quick and very visual, which, I know
I
it's
love Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah. So Susan_Wiggs_ on Instagram, and my website is susanwiggs.com. I have a newsletter you can sign up for. That's probably the best way.
And you mentioned it already, but I'm going to re-mention it, is that you have a readers group guide on your website for this book, and you can find the playlist and questions. And it's such a great book for book clubs, because there is so much to talk about, way more than we talked about here, because we don't want to give spoilers, but there are 6 different characters whose viewpoints we dive into that we can really dig into. So go check that out on her website. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. It was such a delight speaking with you about Wayward Girls. So thank you for being with us.
And thank you for having me. You guys are great.
Thank you. Now be sure to tune in next week to Friends in Fiction, when Kristy and Patti will welcome debut author Morgan Pager to discuss her new novel, The Art of Vanishing, which Patti pimped out on Good Morning America recently, and debut author Laura Dickerman to discuss her new novel, Hot Desk. Great book title.
It's such a good book title.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it sounds like a Mary Kay book title, honestly.
I don't know. Wayward Girl is pretty. I'm having FOMO about all these titles.
I know. When we're struggling for our next title.
Yeah. Okay. So the next, you can catch that show with Morgan Pager and Laura Dickerman. That show will air on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, August 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And it'll be published to our podcast for your listening pleasure on Friday, August 8th.
Thank you to everyone for being here with us and with Susan, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.